I remember time after time as a young child, seeing other kids with their fathers, seeing other boys with their fathers, and wondering, um, what that may have felt like. I found myself connected to male figures that honestly um, seemed like they were a fatherly figure, but for whatever reason, whenever they got frustrated, you never felt like you were being fathered. You automatically understood in that moment that you were still nephew, or in some terms, you were nothing. So it began to create this cycle of rejection. And then at 12, there was a turning point. My name is Pastor Elijah Mendoza. And when I was invited, I thought about maybe a moment where I faced warfare or faced a challenge. And thinking about it, if I had to pick one to really share with you guys, it would have to be one that lasted pretty much all of my life so far. My mom and my dad, they were not married when they had me. 2 weeks after I was born, my dad left. And so for the majority of my life, I was without a father. Starting off as young as I can remember, as early as I can remember, um, I had questions as to why he wasn't there. Maybe there was something wrong with me, perhaps, or could I have done something maybe to convince him to be there for us and to navigate life. I remember time after time as a young child, 6 and 7 years of age, seeing other kids with their fathers, seeing other boys with their fathers, and wondering, um, what that may have felt like, and in a sense, almost trying to escape the moment of the reality that he wasn't there. Maybe to come into some imaginary world where he was there. It never worked because the reality always was there that he wasn't present, and that began to kind of tear away at my self esteem. Um, Interestingly enough, not only was it a personal warfare, but I had a lot of misunderstanding. And what I mean by that is people, namely close family members and people of connection, would talk about me, um, which you would think, as a child, not having a father, you would think that they would edify you and build you up. But I went through a phase, especially around 8 to about maybe 11, where I dealt with people talking about me. And not only talking about me, but talking about my father, who I didn't even know. I remember distinctively in moments of confrontation, um, family members and friends, that's why your dad is not here. Or, you do this just like your father and blah, 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 this. And that in itself built on the warfare I was dealing with internally, already questioning myself, but also having to deal with people and their comments. And I'm sure, looking back, that they didn't mean what they said, but I mean, whenever you're in an emotional space, and an irrational space, you can say things that could damage even after you apologize. And so I dealt with that really intensely. And then I dealt with another part of warfare where I began to have bad encounters with male figures. And what I mean by that is whenever you start questioning yourself because maybe your father's not there, I can speak from my experience. And on top of the questioning, have people commenting on it. A lot of times you try to numb the pain by replacing it. And so I found myself um, connected to male figures um, that were not so loving. Um, and primarily, this was in a family context. um, uncles that honestly um, seemed like they were a fatherly figure, but for whatever reason, whenever they got frustrated, you never felt like you were being fathered. You automatically understood in that moment that you were still nephew, or in some terms, you were nothing. I remember one particular time, one uncle that I had who I tried to, kind of medicate, I guess, the fatherlessness that I was experiencing with. He was very nice at one point, but again, when he got upset, began to say those same statements. But it wasn't just about the absence of my father, but he even began to mutate, if I could use that word, concerning me. Um, you're not a real man, you're going to be a homosexual, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. So it began to create this cycle of rejection. And then at 12, there was a turning point. When I got 12, the narratives continued, the questions continued, but I really began to get very, very serious in the things of God. Now, mind you, I've served God, I've loved God since I was a kid. I've been in the things of God, I've been in the church, but it was something about the age of 12 where it really began to go to another level. And at that particular place, of course, um, I got filled with the Holy Spirit. I was really on fire at that time. But in addition to that, I began to be taken on a journey of self introspection. I begin to be challenged by God to look within, to see behind the questions, behind the commentaries of people, behind the comparisons, behind the failed attempts to replace a father who wasn't there through um, unfit and unprepared male models. Was there bitterness? Was there anger? And to my surprise, there was. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of frustration. And I went through this journey of having to forgive someone I never really met. I want to mention this as well. Not only was it hard to forgive him, but it was hard to forgive his family. Because I distinctly remember in the process of this warfare experience of fatherlessness, one day, um, my family calling me and letting me know that my grandfather passed and that the funeral was on the same day that they called. And that was, in addition to all that I've experienced, but that was another stinger. So I think that was the greater hurt. Um, but at 12, I began to slowly walk through that journey. And that journey happened from 12 to 18 years of age. 6 years of wrestling internally, not having anyone to talk to, because to be quite honest, the environment I was in wasn't a bad one. They loved me and they took care of me, they provided for me. But you could be in an environment, but yet still not have a place that is called safe. So the introvert that I am, I internalize it and I begin to work on it, begin to work on it, begin to work on it. And before you know it, I was 18. It's almost like the 12 years of working was an audition for a moment that I didn't know was coming. I graduated high school, graduated, top 1% of the class, accomplishments. I'm getting ready to go to college, Louisiana Tech in Boston, and I'm excited. I'm about to be a grown man. But a phone call would come that would make me turn into a little boy immediately. Got this phone call, um, and my mom mentioned that my dad had called. And when he got on the line with me, it was surreal because I said to myself, this is the process I've been working on for 6 years. This is the process I've been working on for 6 years. And the few years before that, I endured some things that was very grueling emotionally. And so I was practicing the line of "I forgive you" for 6 years, but now I would have to actually say it and mean it. And he said, "Son, I'm proud of you. I'm happy that you graduated." And then within the same breath, he said, "I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I know I wasn't there. I know I wasn't the best father, but do know that I love you." And when he said it, if I can be honest, there was a combination of love that I didn't know I had, but also numbness because it was a shock to me. But I opened up my mouth and I said, "I forgive you." I couldn't say "I love you" just yet, but I said, "I forgive you." And that was the end of that. I didn't hear from him a couple of years after that. A couple of years after that, I'm in college. This whole time I'm in ministry, God is moving, all of that. But I get to the place now where I'm married and I have my firstborn son. This is several years later. I'm now been about 24. Um, I get another call, and this time it's not just me, but it's me, my wife, and my firstborn son, Elijah Jr. And it's my auntie on his sister. She says, "We want to see you." I said, "You want to see me?" "Yeah, we want to see you." And so my wife encouraged me to go. So we rented a car and got some money. We wasn't the most richest back then, but we got some money. We packed a little newborn in the back seat and we drove 15 hours to Fort Myers, Florida, and went to my auntie's house, got there with a little newborn. And when we got there, he was supposed to show up, and he didn't show up until late that night. And so in the waiting process, I'm like, yeah, I wasted my time coming. The human part starts rising up, and then he shows up at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. And when he walks in, the first thing he does is he cries and he embraces me. And at that moment, I felt the warfare coming to a close. It's interesting how you can go throughout your whole life, 12, 18 years of age, 24, and not realize all it takes is one moment for that warfare to come to a close. I think part of the warfare, as I mentioned earlier, was the questions I had. And in that moment, he began to answer them. Without going into too much detail, he began to tell me he wanted to come see me, but he was in some situations in his marriage um, that prevented him from seeing me. And at that moment, I could have used the traditional line, "There's no excuse." But remember, I was practicing this place of forgiveness, and forgiveness understands, even when it doesn't make sense to the brain. Forgiveness has to understand because at the end of the day, we don't know what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. And so, even though a part of me didn't understand, I chose to understand. And then he began to give me some money. He began to hug my son. And that was another level of healing because now he was embracing what I produced. Um, Now he was embracing a future I didn't even think he was going to be in. Um, and that was the beginning of healing. From 25, I'm now 32. From 25 to about 27, 28 ish, we begin to talk on and off. And it got to a point where healing was happening at a rate and at a pattern that um, it began to almost feel like it was making up for the time that was lost. But I want to encourage someone that warfare, at the end of warfare, there's always a promise, and that promise is bigger and better than what we could ever imagine or think. And around the age of 27, unfortunately, my dad, he had gotten divorced, 27, 28 ish. And he called me one day. He told me he was getting divorced. His wife had left him. He's in Fort Myers. My mom is in New Orleans. He says, how's your mom doing? I said, she's fine. She's okay. She's great. And he says, can I talk to her? Can I speak with her? I said, why? And he said, well, son, if you have to know, I think I made the wrong choice. I was with my wife for umpteen amount of years. I think it was 30 years they were married, close to 30 years. And he said, honestly, um, I haven't stopped thinking of your mom. And so, again, I'm divided. I'm walking that journey of forgiveness, but I'm a son. I'm like, okay, are you just doing this because you want, you want to make up? Is that your way of making up? Are you doing this because, you see, your wife leaving and, you just want to start fresh? Is this a rebound type of thing? What is this? And he said, I'm serious. And so I said, well, I'll let you talk to her. And I did not think anything was going to come out of it because I know my mom, loving woman, sweet mother, but she's no nonsense. And so I knew and I had to trust that she would be able to handle it and see through anything if there was anything sketchy. Well, he talks to her and actually the same day, later on that day, she calls me and she tells me, wow, she talked to him and it was nice talking to him and that was nice. I said, oh, that's great. And then they start talking more and they start talking more and they start talking more. And then all of a sudden, he calls me one day, months later, and says, I'm coming to New Orleans. I said, okay. And then he comes to New Orleans and he moves in with my mom. Because my family, they live together. My mom, my grandma, all my aunts, they live in the same house. I start seeing some instability. And I'm like, okay. He starts saying he's going to leave again. And because anytime the enemy sees God doing something, he always try to trigger things. He starts coming and going. He came and literally 2 weeks later he left, went back to Fort Myers, and he came back, stayed a couple months, left again. And I started to find myself getting angry again. And you know what that taught me? Forgiveness is a continual process. I started to find myself, it's almost like I was more angry now than I was when he wasn't there. Like, what's going on? Because now you're not just hurting me, you're hurting my mom. And then
Would you say that, would you consider that, I guess, kind of a form of trauma in a way?
that I would consider at that time trauma. Because it forgiveness, this may sound strange, but forgiveness one time doesn't heal trauma. Forgiveness continually heals trauma. And I forgave, I forgot, but I forgot to continue to forgive. That sense of abandonment, I would say, that sense of rejection. And I think it was worse because it wasn't just me being abandoned, but it was her being abandoned, if that makes sense. That cycle continued for about a year. And then we had a serious talk. I remember the talk like it was yesterday. I called him. And I know the Bible says, honor your father and mother, and you will live long. But that conversation wasn't honorable at that time. I said that you came into our life and you this and you that. If you don't want us, just leave. After that, I began to see him working on himself and on the relationship. And around this time, this was I can't even remember, but I know it was a year and a half into their, I guess what I would now call courting. And in 2021, my mom and my dad called me and they said, "Son, we got to talk to you about something." I said, "What do you got to talk to me about?" And now I'm thinking, because I'm in this loop now. Remember, from the age of 4 to the age of 12 to the age of 18 to the age of 24 to the age of 30. I'm in this loop of Good times, bad times, relief, misery, forgive, be angry, forgive, be angry.
Yeah.
And then they called and said, son, we want to get married. And I said, what? I was like, what's going on here? And they said, we want you to do the wedding. This is in 2021. And I said, oh, wow. And I agreed. I agreed. I think I initially agreed because the protection mechanism in me started to like go off. Like, well, maybe if I marry him, I'll finally have the family that I want, and I won't have to worry about him leaving. So maybe this is the way to God to keep it solid, you know. But I went ahead and agreed. And in 2022, of November 2022, I officiated their wedding. And sometimes you can think you're completely healed, but don't know that you need healing. And sometimes it's not a conversation that brings forth the healing. It helps, but sometimes a moment helps even more. I think the conversations that I had with my dad of the sorrow that he had for not being there and having to apologize and me having to forgive, I think that healed some. But I think the moment that really healed me was standing before them and seeing them come together and saying, now I pronounce you man and wife. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was, of course, officiating the wedding, but then after the wedding, they came up to me and they said, we love you, son. And we took the first picture of my entire lifetime as a family. And that felt a little weird, but it was good at the same time. And from that point till now, I have experienced what I missed for the last 30 years of life. I can finally say that the war has ended. The warfare has ended. Um, and now I can say that I can finally feel victory. I think the tips I would leave with you guys is forgive. Go through the questions, let them say what they have to say, go through the process. But know in your forgiveness, you will have conversations that will heal you, but it will lead you to a moment. God will lead you to a moment. And when you get in that moment, as weird as it may feel, embrace it. Embrace it. And I embraced it. And I'm still embracing it. And it feels good. The war was worth it. It was worth it because the victory is sweet. That one moment that I experienced in November of 2022, and moments that I have experienced after that, moments where I be preaching. I remember I one time was preaching in Opelousas within the last, I think it was last year, and they showed up to the service. Mom and dad, they showed up. Uh, moments where they're they I'm an independent man, of course, but they send me some money or they call and say, "Son, are you okay?" Those moments, and you know what? Looking back on it, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing because it built me, but I think it built them and it built our family.